All right, this is the video walkthrough talking about my new product, which I am calling the JW.S Figma 001 Pro V1, which stands for John Way Studios. Figma, this is a Figma mockup of a mobile device. This is model 001. This is sort of the test pilot, and if this goes well, I could see additional versions being created, um, different options, different angles, like all sorts of things. I think there's a lot of potential that this is sort of tapping into, and it'll be great to see kind of what the interest is on this. And if the interest is high, then I think I could see myself creating a lot more options for this as a broader system. But yeah, first things first. Let's get through this. And yeah, so this is also the Pro Edition. This is a kind of robust tool. I want to create a light version at some point. Not too far down the road. I don't know exactly when. The priority definitely goes on developing this tool. But that'll be a stripped back version that'll be much cheaper. Won't be able to make nearly as interesting of mockups as I think this does. This has a ton of variations, a ton of options. And I think, yeah, for me, there's a lot of mockups you see out there, and you can kind of pinpoint which one's from where, and they're really good, but they're very limited in terms of what you're able to do. And this is sort of trying to sidestep that a little bit and give you the tools to create something a bit more unique, a bit more catered to whatever the application is, whether it's for a client or you just want to mix things up in terms of how you present your own sort of work. I don't know, like there's so much variability that's very accessible through very little effort. um, and yeah, I guess in terms of how to use this, you want to have a base level understanding of Figma, um, understanding how components work in theory. You don't have to know how to create them, you don't know how to modify them. That's all sort of handled on this end. There's auto layout in here, you don't need to know how to use that. If you're running into problems with auto layout, you've gone astray. I don't know where you've gone, but come back. um, and there's variants. That's kind of how you control the bulk of the parameters within this mockup. It's choosing from a list of like, what sort of shadows do you want? Where do you want the lighting to come from? And then there's some toggle options in terms of like, masking to certain things and that's all through boolean. And that's something I learned very recently, and not something you have to learn. It's something that you sort of reap the benefits of from a very easy interface. It was looking like it was going to be a bit more complicated, but boolean is something that has greatly simplified the interface for the end user, and I think there's a lot more potential that could be tapped into in terms of like streamlining things for the end user. Not to say that this is chunky or inefficient or cumbersome. I think it's still what it does, and the flow that it takes to create those is still pretty streamlined and pretty light, all things considered, especially for the results and the customizability, if that's a word, of what you're able to achieve. So I'm pretty excited about this. And I mean, mostly because compared to Photoshop files and all those mockups, I've done that. I've did that for years. Um, I think I did my most recently just a month or two ago, and it's like 400 gigabyte file, which is just ridiculous. Figma is very efficient, even with this file and all the sort of stacking and rendering that's going on. It's everything in here is done with shape layers, so it can scale to your heart's content. Really, the main limiter is your content in terms of how large it is and how much it can scale up. So that's on you. If you have vector format, just go nuts, buddy. Like you can just keep scaling and upscaling as high as you want. Just use the scale tool. Don't use whatever the cursor V and dragging out, because it will not scale all the effects and everything appropriately. From what I've seen, it does work. Scaling, you are kind of going out on your own there. But from what I've seen, it works just fine. So, and the fact that everything's built on components, it's something that you can really be strategic about in terms of how you apply it from this, like what you do with the output in terms of, like, let's say putting in a broader library, being able to use this tool to then modify it. And yeah, there's a lot of just like interchangeability with components and variants and boolean that makes this what I think is a pretty cool little tool. And yeah, I know it's sort of a top-down look of a mobile device, which is maybe a little, it's a crowded space when it comes to mockups for that. So, I don't think we're going to reinvent the wheel with this, but in terms of being able to just customize it and make it your own, I think that's sort of where the value is in this. And getting into like all those additional scenarios, bringing in more kind of just like crazy options in terms of what we were able to choose in terms of creating an environment around it, setting the context. Yeah, there's some cool stuff I want to explore. And yeah, so I guess that's sort of the preamble. 6 minutes in, long amble, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, I'll just dive into the tool and sort of do a mock-up from scratch. I have no plans for this. See how it goes. Maybe it falls apart. Maybe it goes well. But yeah, so you can see at a high level, this is all the sets of tools. And each one has a single function in terms of what it's adding to the overall export. And so I'll walk through each of them. Some of them are more complex than others, but they're all pretty straightforward at the end of the day. So I'll just kind of walk through them. So you have the tools that are available right now with version 1 is background color, background texture, custom background image. So that one, so the first two, background color and background texture, those are meant to be interchangeable. You'll see when we go into the tool about how you can set a background color and then a texture that then through selecting different blend modes, you can create different options. You can also then add in a custom image as well. So that's something that would override it. Like let's say you've created something in Photoshop and you just want to import it. You can do that with this. You just drop it in there and that is your background. But then you can also do processing on top of that. That'll help sort of unify the device and your background. But you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Device styles, so you'll have a couple of device styles you can choose from. Device color, screen context, so that gets into some interfaces that you can easily add on to your to whatever you want to put on screen, whether that's UI or if it's I mean, for me, it's like wallpaper packs. Like this is something that's going to be super easy and efficient for me to just drop images in, which would be right here in screen content. Island notch, that's sort of like if you want to make things a bit more real, you can add that in there and all of its clunkiness. Somehow that makes it more modern, at least in my head when I've been messing around with it. So screen texture, there's some fun stuff you can add on there. Lighting, so we'll take a look at how you can basically create a lot more 3D effects with this and making it blur the lines between more of an illustrative style and more of a photorealistic style. Excuse me. As well as having what I'm calling atmospherics. And so this is sort of, I'm putting in beta right now. There's some things that aren't fully ironed out. You'll kind of see what I'm talking about when I go on a deeper dive through these. And then shadows are a sort of last touch. There is going to be a lucky number 13 added on to this. I'm not ready to quite talk about it yet. It's another tool I've been developing in the background, which I'm very excited about. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen it alluded to. And that one is more or less ready to go, but there's a lot of testing that goes into it. And I think this is probably the better one to release first. So yeah, that's the high level. So let's just jump in and make a mockup. So starting off, if you're not, well, hopefully you're familiar with Figma, but because of the way things are structured and the way Figma works, you can double click to sort of dive in to the next level. And so I've tried to put it on here in just like little tool tips, which can be turned off. Like if you don't want any sort of overlays kind of guiding you, like let's say You've made 3 mock-ups, you're a crafty veteran, you don't need this shit anymore. Like, just turn it off. Don't need it. And so I'll leave it on for now, but you can toggle it on, toggle it off as needed. And yeah, so you have to double tap twice. And this is sort of the nuance of Figma that it's not bad. You get used to it. It's just kind of like a little cumbersome thing for writing instructions for it. But you want to double click and then double click again. So that takes you into the nested component. And there's a reason for that. I won't go into why it's structured that way, but that's the way it is. And so you have on the right side over here, you can see there's things like color and style. And so you can just choose which color you want. Like, let's say you want a light gray, and you can choose between a flat and gradient. And for this one, it's very subtle. I'm just going to leave it flat for now. Something like, I just want to make something that's like very obvious in terms of what all is happening. So I see a lot of opportunity actually for this very first step to make it very robust in terms of creating something that's very unique. I think that's probably going to be 1.1. I want to do a little bit more research on what I can do to make this like very dynamic. Right now it's somewhat limiting, but you can always go in and do overrides. Like if you're going to do overrides anywhere in this file, do it here. I don't recommend going into the source file and doing it there. I don't recommend doing it in the final compiled output. So that's the other part is you're going through each of these steps, and then each of these are then routed into this compiler, where this is where you'll do all your exports. And you can see if you do Shift R, you have all your common aspect ratios. And so you can, like I was saying with the double click, you just double click in. Oh, so that's 2x3, 9x6, 3x2, 16x9, 1x1 smaller. Like, and then I gotta redo it again as I clicked on a ruler. But you can get into like the device. You can export the screen out only. You can export out just the device. But I'll kind of getting ahead of myself right now. So then you have background texture, and as mentioned before, these are meant to be interchangeable between the color and the texture. And this is so you can create something more dynamic. And so you can set the blend mode to overlay or multiply. Those are the 2 options right now, just sort of playing with like the lights and darks based on the background color. And one thing worth noting, I think I accidentally turned it off, is, oh no, it's there. Throughout this process, you'll see you're sort of building the mockup as you go. So right now, like let's say if I go back and I change this to, let's say, red, you can see how it's updating everywhere. And so there's a layer in here with like a backing that's additive to kind of give you, like as you're applying blend modes and making these decisions, they're more informed decisions, so you can kind of see things building as you go. But you can turn that off and have it more of like an isolated view, where you still get like the outline of a device in here to give you some context, but you're not really able to see it unless you go down into the compiler, where that is always going to be the place, like your source of truth of like what are all these tools amounting to right now. But for now, I found like the additive tool is very helpful. I don't think I want redstone. Again, I think we'll want to keep this somewhat nice on the eyes. Let's go, was it middle gray? Yeah, let's go middle gray. And then, I mean, there's things like stone, there's plastic. If you do like an overlay, let's just do stone overlay. So this is our background that we're going to be working with. Custom background image, you can dive in here and there'll be a folder that you can just sort of drop in whatever you want. I have a sample image in here, just like texture I shot as a point of reference, and you can just, if you've got something in mind, you can just drop it in there, and you can see it entirely overrides the previous creations with the background color and background texture. This is in the case like you just want to make something custom in Photoshop, or you're given an asset where you don't need to generate it with this tool. Yeah, this is where you put it in there. Turn that off for now. And then next step is device style. So you can see over here we have realistic and minimal. And so, like let's say realistic, you want like a light device, or if you want silver device. So how and all that's being applied, like that may change over time based on requests and in terms of how people like the application of color. Like the light device is more of like a white frame to it. I don't know if that's going to be looked at like white sunglasses and just kind of be like, maybe not. But the idea was to create a bit of range between this and the space gray device at this point. And yeah, you can do realistic or you can do minimal, which then strips out all the sort of additional lighting in here. So we'll leave it space gray minimal for now. And one thing to note as we get into the next step, space gray is the best color for coloring a device. It's because of how it's computed in this overlay, you'll notice the best results will be with space gray. So yeah, you just double click on here, you go down to selection color and you just choose whatever content or whatever color you want. So let's say you want something a little more subtle, like something like a, I don't know, whatever like their midnight blue is. I don't know. Let's go with that. So yeah, you can see how it's coming together. You got your own device color. And then we want to get into screen context. And so this is adding, you know, a little context to your content. Very straightforward, I know. Yeah, you have different options like none, which is you just have no sort of context and you just want to have like a full bleed image. Then just leave this on none and carry on. But let's say I want to have like a browser top. Then I can set whether I want like a light or dark theme. And I can change the time. Say 10:10. And I want to have it as John Way Studio. Well, I don't even know my own domain. johnway.studio. Don't forget it. There you go. And yeah, I can just move it down to the bottom if I want to be kind of like Safari-ish. It's not really. I kind of made my own little icons and stuff like that. The idea is just to keep it minimal. Like, you know, the place of a mock-up is not to really be the hero so much. It's sort of to like enhance what you're displaying. I did kind of skip one little bit. I forgot. But it's like if you want to put texture in here, there's a folder where you can kind of go nuts, buddy. Like you want to have like an iridescent sort of phone? Why not? Go nuts. Yeah, so that's one of the places where you can kind of import your own image. And yeah, context, so let's say browser at the bottom, why not? And so this is where the meat of the mock-up is. One of the places, I think, where I wanted to make sure this was very easy to use. So there's additional notes in the layers panels in terms of like where to place everything. It should be very, very obvious. There's a frame in here and then you just paste in whatever you'd like. And so like, let's say I dropped in here previously a mobile comp that's got messed up in the migration from Figma or Sketch to Figma. But you can see it's really easy so there's rulers. If you push Shift R, you can see the rulers to the canvas. Everything should start snapping. So this is the case, like something is like very nicely sized for the canvas. But a big thing I wanted to really be able to do was just drop it in here and I can just move it around, which to me is kind of nice. Like you don't have to worry about bleed off. You don't have to worry about like getting it perfect. And you don't have to worry about like, oh, if I pull in the edges of it, then I have got to re-expand it again and then move. Like I want this thing to be as easy as possible. So the idea is like once you put it within the specified folder, you can just drag it wherever you want. And I put an overlay so you can see what else is out there, but you can see like in the compiler, it is cropping just to that canvas. So yeah, I think it works pretty well. I don't know what was being grabbed in this little demonstration, but Oh, I guess it was some of these other layers. I know, I think I moved everything. Yeah, yeah, what are you gonna do? Guess I was starting to drag things on accident. So that's something to just be wary of. Um, I put everything in an auto layout to try and keep it lined up and keeping it in position. But there are some things that you can drag, so just make sure you don't drag it around. If you do, just undo it, just as I did. So cautionary tale right there. Yeah, and so also the island, if you want to add that in there, there's a small island and a big island, or no island. Um, yeah, for whatever reason, that helped modernize the kind of Nokia looking square device. And if you are curious why I went with that, it's because the rounded corners of like an iPhone, just for me in terms of mockups, got really annoying. There's so much negative space in terms of like, oh, where am I cropping it to? I've got to kind of actually like make some conscious decisions based on like what this negative space is. Annoying. I just decided like, you know what? I started with something that's a bit more rounded, but squaring it off has been so much better. So, plus I wouldn't mind a square device. It's, kind of boring-ish, but I'm for it. And so you have your screen content, you have your context, and let's say you want to. So this now we're getting into like the bells and whistles of like adding a bit more customization to it. So let's say you want to have some wear on the screens, like let's put scratches 1 on, or scratches 2, or you're really irresponsible and you cracked your damn phone. I don't expect this one to get a lot of use. It's kind of funny. I'll probably add some more options in there. Like if you want to have a series of images with scratches, like ideally you're not able to see patterns or repeated. Like if you wanted multiple devices and have them look believable next to each other, having that variability is kind of important. So scratches 1, scratches 2 should get the job done for now. I'd like to kind of look at that down the road and see what all is possible. But to me, it's these little things that start adding a little bit more believability in terms of, this is going more the photorealistic route where, I mean, you could just avoid all of these things and just have a very minimal mock-up and you're good to go. And so, yeah, getting into lighting. So this is one that I think I'm most excited about. And so to start, and there's no lighting whatsoever. This is all flat. But you have these different options like soft minimal, softbox top, office lights, directional, harsh light, dramatic, and extra dramatic. Some of these at the bottom, I'm actually in the process of refining a little bit right before shipping it out. So that may change just a tad, but by and large, it's going to be there. I'd like to have some like dramatic lighting as well as, very subtle sort of lighting here as well. And I'll turn off these overlays real fast. And you can see like just the dimensionality that starts coming into it in terms of creating just like there's subtle amounts of light that's cast on the ground. It goes over the devices. So this is really serving to unify a lot of like the vector shape formats, vector objects, as well as like the bitmap background. That's something like if you get into compositing, like as much as you can to kind of create subtle gradations in different directions and start blending things together, the more sort of realistic it looks. And you don't have to do a lot in this to really get that done. But yeah, and so you can also, right now, there's top and top right are the two options in terms of like, so you can see the light source shifted to the top right. You can see the shadows down here. This will become more apparent with something like long shadows, which is a bit more of like an intense bright light here, but you have these longer cast shadows that come across it. And yeah, there's also whether or not you want to have reflections on the screen. So if let's go with turn off the additive. And so you could see in the isolated mode, these reflections that show up on the screen. And like, let's say, I think they're pretty realistic in terms of what they would be in real life. They're not perfect, of course. These are created with vector shapes and blurs and stuff like that. So it's representational, but let's say you have content that you don't want affected, you can just turn it off. So you can still keep like your different options of like, let's say like office lights, so you can see like the different reflections. You just turn it off. Um, and then I decided to go a little nuts and add in something like glowing edges. So that creates an additional edge light for wherever the source is. So like let's say it's top right, or then it shifts to the top. But it's off by default because I think it's kind of a bells and whistles sort of thing. Like if you want to add it on, I support it. And then the other thing that I added in was a toggle for phone only. So as you can see right now, there's a subtle gradation over the background. But if you toggle that on, it removes that entirely. So the benefit of that is like once you go into some of the export functions, you can isolate everything to the phone itself. You don't have like all this additional soft gradations off of like outside of the phone. Like if you want to put multiple phones together that look like this, you can. This is something just through like testing I found is useful. Yeah, there was no other way to really do it with some of the way like the lighting was being computed. I sort of had to create this toggle, which honestly is probably the easiest way, having like really gone through it. But yeah, so you can see we'll turn on back the additive approach so you can see where we're at. I mean, it's starting to, it's starting to come together. Again, like you can have even longer shadows. I want to have like a very dramatic one and stuff that alludes to something like a teaser. That teaser version might be in like a 1.1, but it's something that's definitely on the roadmap of where I'd like to go with it. But yeah, you can see we are getting places. And so now, kind of the fun stuff. So again, like you can still see like a clear delineation between the bitmap and the vector format. Like the vector is just always going to be sharp on sharp on sharp on sharp. Like that is sort of like a dead giveaway in terms of a mockup, if you ask me. So I set about trying to break that barrier down a little bit. And there's a couple ways you can do that. One way is grain. So I decided to add in different amounts of grain. And so this is where the beta lies. It's all in grain. In terms of, you'll notice the tonality of the image changes. It flattens it out a little bit. And I've done my best to try and offset it. And there might be additional things I can do to kind of compensate and hack it together to kind of keep the same tonality. But right now it is sort of flattening it out, which is in line with my personal taste of how I like to create mockups and like how I edit my photos. So I'm kind of happy with it, but some people might not be too keen on it. And so like you can see, even when I go up to medium grain, it is a nice effect, but it is flattening out the image substantially. So if you're going more for like a vibe thing, that's the only time I'd start recommending some of the heavier grains. There's medium and there is heavy. I'm gonna get that updated, kind of noted in the old brain compartment. So there will be an extra heavy, which will really sort of play into like the abstract sort of realm. And again, with this, there is a phone only option. So for whatever reason, I don't really recommend this, especially as it pertains to grain, but the option is there. Just, yeah, maybe don't. The only reason I want to keep it in there is like if you have heavy grain for your background and you want to match it to some degree, like you don't want there to be like an absence of grain next to grain is a little jarring. So depending on what this background image is, whether it's one of the prefab ones or one of the ones that you brought in, you may want to use this as a means to match it to some degree. It's very limited in terms of what you can do. I do want to build out more options here in terms of getting this right. I think there's a lot of potential in this to do some really cool stuff. I'm learning quite a lot as I go. So I expect that is something where there'll be a lot of further development. And so the other part that I think is pretty cool is the focus. So the grain helps break down some of like the perfection in the vector formats, but I think adding just a touch of soft focus is kind of I'm not going to use secret sauce because I hate that, but it is a little bit of a trick of, you know, getting things to coexist a little nicer. Um, and yeah, right now it's on phone only, but you can see like that's mostly the grain that's taking effect. We can turn the grain off, but you can see like even like no grain, just a little bit of a blur helps sort of unify it with the background. Again, like if you want to isolate it to the phone itself, and leave this intact, that is something you can absolutely do. That will apply to both. Right now, there's no option for phone only focus and phone only grain. It's kind of all or nothing at this point. That is something that, depending on demand, can be looked at further down the road. And then there's another option I just added in. This is also very beta, but it's an option for additional screen reflections. So I'll just show it. But it doesn't really work very well with this image, unfortunately. That's kind of great. I'm recording this and this is like I'm totally winging all of this. But the idea is that, like, you know, bouncing off the screen, you'll have like context of what's going on in the background, which it's very much like a nuanced thing. And I think I want to develop that and actually make it more robust and actually good. This is not a great example, but it's sort of tilting the hand at, like, you know, this is 1.0, this is something I'm thinking about, and, you know, kind of shows the potential of some of the other stuff I want to get into with this. And let's see, I'll make sure I left this in the right place. So we'll add a little bit of grain, get the vibes going, soft focus. Oh, I mean, you can go like, so it's like out of focus is really like, if you want this to be pushed to the background, it's something you can, or if you want to do like a teaser. I'm delineating blurry as like, I almost wrote something really dumb like blown focus. But out of focus, soft focus is like basically just, I mean, it's doing a sort of okay job at replicating like lens softness that you find in imagery. And the last touch is shadows. And this is also probably something I'll do it as I'm, well, not turn it off. I'm going to go ahead and mark this one beta as well. And not because of how it works, but because, or like the effect it gets, but because the workflow is not perfect. There's potential for error, and that's something I wanted to kind of make this as easy as possible. Like, you don't have to make all these connections, like the file does it for you. But the only thing I can't control is, it's not a huge ask from you, but this is not able to inherit the light source of the other section. So let's say on the lighting, I went ahead and I put a top right light source. You can, in theory, put a top light source, not a top right. So there may be incongruencies between the two. It's not that bad. It is mentioned in the notes. It's called out as like, pay attention to that. Just make sure, like, if you want this to be consistent for now. It's, again, I don't think it's a huge ask, or something that's really that complex to take care of and manage, but it is something that's not ideal. I'll acknowledge that for sure. And there's just different parameters in terms of creating additional levels of depth and dynamicism. It's not even a word, but makes it just more dynamic in terms of adding a little more depth. So you have the highlights from the light source in the top right, and then again creating just another one of those gradations across the mock-up that helps sort of make it feel a little bit more natural. And yeah, I mean, so you can choose the amount, and then you can choose the light source. So this is top, there's medium, there's heavy. Again, some of this is, again, it's earning the beta title more and more as I play with it. But then same thing goes with this. Like, if you want to just mask it to the phone, for whatever reason, you want to just put this in isolation, like you want to turn, let's say the background, oh, that's everything. you want to just like hide the background or export this as a PNG, you absolutely can. Um, so, and yeah, like this is something like that's the flow of creating your own mockup, but feel free at any point to just jump ahead and like you can just jump straight um, to here and just drop in your own image, like, and just do nothing else. Or you can just be like, no, I just want to add like a little lighting on a simple device, and it can be just like a 2 minute thing. Or it can be very involved. Like that's sort of the thinking with the Pro release is, there's a lot of customization in here with all these options as you saw through the different lighting techniques, light sources. I think there's more options I want to get into there. And yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's kind of like hacking components a little bit, but it's very much in line with how it all should work. And yeah, like so, just to kind of show, if I want to go back, like let's say, I mean, everything else I chose, like the imagery is black and white, the background's black and white. Like let's just make this all black and white, and there you go. Or it's like I want to have shadows are just on the device. I want it on more than the device. I want it top right. Atmospherics, I want to go in here and make this a little bit more vibey. So let's go like medium green, not phone only. So you can see like it starts flattening out the tonality, which not the intended feel, but like it really glues it together quite substantially. And you can see like from where it started. I mean, you can walk it back through this process. But then you can see it all compiled down here in your final output. And yeah, I kind of talked about the exporting a little bit before. There'll be some notes on this included in the margins in terms of the best process that I've found. I'm very much open to hearing out other solutions. I'm also looking at what makes the most sense for this. Like right now, everything's consolidated in a single canvas. So you have your 1x1, you have your 2x3, and like I was saying, like you turn the rulers on and you can see where everything is. And it's one of those things like you can click down through the different sizes and you can just get to the aspect. Like let's say I know I want 3x2. The one caveat that you have to do is you have to click clip content. That is the only way it's going to ignore all the other stuff that goes out to the other aspect ratios. It's not that big of an ask, but again, like I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, and that's sort of one of those things like it should be as easy as just choosing your size and you export. So there may be things that look at like, this exports out to a bunch of different canvases pre-cropped. That's something I'm looking at as well. I do want to make this as streamlined, as efficient as possible. So yeah, right now, I set everything to JPEG 1x. You can go ahead and modify that as you'd like. And yeah, you can also copy as a PNG. So that's Shift Command C, and you'll just paste that bad boy, and there you go. You got your flattened mockup. And if you want to make that bigger, you can just go down to your export size, change that to, let's say 2x. You notice it'll probably take a little bit longer, copying as a PNG. Substantially larger. But don't paste in there. It is twice as big. So your output is 380/40 by 2554, which is pretty sizey. And yeah, like I was saying, you can scale up as much as you want. Go nuts. Just be aware of like your screen content is going to be the limiting factor. So don't scale up too much. And one other thing I wanted to kind of look at was a background list option. So everything is masked to the device. But there is lighting effects like the shadow that is included. So you can see, let's say, just put it. Oh, there you go. You want to have some sort of cool organic thing. The only thing that kind of sucks with this is the extra canvas. So you just gotta I have to like crop in on this a little bit, which I do want to look at different ways of doing it. There are ways like you can just start clicking down. There is a frame in here for phone only. It does not get the shadows. I don't know of the best way quite to do that yet, so I'm going to keep researching that. That is something to keep an eye out for and an update. And one other thing to mention, I found out, like if you want to export out this in individual layers, like let's say I want to have my shadows, you can see in the tools, this master layer, like usually when you modify them, you go into the nested component. That's how you find all your options to control all the different options. But if you click on the parent one and you push copy as PNG, you can export this out by layers. So let's say I want the background texture that I've created. I can put this here, and then I can put this on top. And then I can get my device. Copy as PNG. And you see, like, these are all transparent. These are all things that I didn't name my layers, which is stupid. Always name your layers. But why is it just disappearing? I don't. Okay. But what's nice about this also is to get this recompiled, basically, is you just go to vertical align center and horizontal align center. I think I had those backwards as I was saying it. But I mean, you've got the buildings of your mockup right here in individual layered options. So whether that's compiling it for the web or any sort of additional purposes where it helps to have this sort of flexibility or to be able to extract the lighting effects, all this can be exported out into individual layers. So that is the long-winded walkthrough of this tool. I hope that was helpful. I'm, as you can see, spent a good while making this thing, and I'm pretty excited about the potential of it. As you can see, just from what we created in this walkthrough, we went through and made something that, you know, definitely has a feel to it, definitely is unique. And as I keep releasing more options, there's going to be more options for more unique creations. Like, I mean, I think the background color is probably priority one at this point, looking at different export abilities. You know, I think this is all things to look at going forward. So, yeah, let me know if you have any questions. If you want to find it, the link will be below. If you want to stay in tune for more products, definitely subscribe to the channel. I do plan on doing a lot more content for the YouTube channel coming up in terms of, like, I've done a lot of live streams, but I want to be more focused on what I'm doing. There's like 4 hours of rambling that I don't think people want to sit through. So, you know, I'll save you guys that. And yeah, I have like a lot of things on my mind in terms of like different specific topics that I think would be helpful for people that I've gotten asked about quite a bit. So yeah, I gotta say it, like and subscribe. But yeah, let me know if you have any feedback, you have any questions. I can't teach you Figma, I'm sorry. I'd love to, kind of busy. But yeah, I think that's it. Hope you enjoy, and hopefully I'll be back soon with another product.